Reverend Gackenheimer, you have created some resources for your work at Silver Lake that focus on racial justice and the work of anti-racism. Can you explain what that looks like, how resources have been used in a camp setting to address these really important topics?
Yes, and first I'll be really clear. I personally have not created any of the resources. The Silver Lake community and what the historic Connecticut Conference United Church of Christ has done that in a variety of ways. The way most recently that we've facilitated that conversation is through this season of COVID, but more directly to that in this season of awakening of white privilege and systemic racism. We've been connecting our families to resources that already have been compiled within the Southern New England Conference UCC, connecting our families with emails, with some video communication about that, and sending those out at times in a weekly order, but also having that resource library available online and connecting others. And then in the summertime, it's taken several different forms. One project that was a really important initiative at Silver Lake has been to help diversify the Silver Lake community. And part of the study that happened several years ago within the community was thinking about when campers of color arrive at camp, if they don't see staff that look like themselves, it's a lot harder for them to feel safe and fully welcomed and included in the community. So the thought and the initiative was to diversify the Silver Lake staff. And out of that came a program that was called the Joseph Clements Job Training Program, JCT. And that ran for 5 summers and had between 8 and 12 16 to 18-year-olds who came during staff development week and had a very, very intense training program, learning to be a part of the Silver Lake staff, but also had all kinds of job skill training and how to navigate the world. And this was for campers of color. So there was that piece, and then some training that went alongside with the Silver Lake folks who were already on staff. And so hoping and working towards having those folks on staff was a piece. The Silver Lake staff goes through a couple of days of training every summer, from usually trained by folks who are trained by the Connecticut Conference now, Southern New England Conference UCC, and their racial justice, anti-racism training. So that's a resource through the conference that happens, and we do that with our staff. And then another piece of this, and the reason I started with the JCT program, is we now have a couple of racial justice conferences that exist. So conferences are weeks of camp for campers to come, and they were started by the facilitators, the leaders of the JCT program. So they've adapted their program to be aged differently, but also to be a little less intense. JCT was a very exhausting week, and you didn't get to play as much on the challenge course and at the waterfront and things. And so the week of camp still has all the joy and immersion of being at camp, but really taking a very intentional and intentionally multiracial, which the JCT program was specifically for young people of color, to really dig into that. And what does it mean to be in community with one another? What does justice look like in the world? What is, really for the white campers, a lot of times it's first even hearing the words white privilege, and then really understanding how built in that to everywhere that is, including at camp. And so we have, out of this program, reflected ourselves, like where are the places where white privilege is just assumed. And everything as simple as the application to camp we've looked at, like what are the assumptions we make about staff? One of the industry realizations was a common question on any application is how many, tell us about your experience in this field. Well, if you're there, their camp is not as accessible to everyone, dependent upon what your context in the world is. And so even having that on the job application in the summer can make it harder to get your job if you have to have had camp experience before. And so things ranging from the deep immersion experience in the summer of doing a racial justice conference to evaluating things like our job applications for summer staff and looking all across the board.
That's really interesting, introspective work. And what I love about the story that you just shared is, you had these groups of young people come and be trained, and then they themselves took it upon themselves to, have this other experience. So you were creating a leadership training program and a mentorship model that then became a perpetuating form of ministry, which is a really rich way to look at youth ministry as a whole. Thank you.
Thanks.